Good morning, folks. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. My name is Patrick Leahy. I'm the Executive Vice President here at the University of Scranton. I want to welcome you to campus on this beautiful summer day here in Scranton. We have a very unique program for you this morning. This is the final PNC Speaker Series event of this academic year, and we got in just in time, didn't we,
Yes,
Pete?
we did, yeah.
Two days left before the academic year officially ends. But I'd like to continue our custom of recognizing a couple of VIPs who are here this morning before we turn it over to Father Malloy for our invocation. Then we'll enjoy breakfast, and then following breakfast we'll go ahead with the majority of the program. But let me ask you, if you would, to join me in recognizing the individuals who frankly make this event possible every year, and that's our great friends from PNC Bank. We're joined this morning, I think, by four of them: Pete Dancek, Deb Kolsofsky, Lauren Allen, and Mike Denon. Thank you all from PNC for making this. There are a few elected officials that are here with us this morning. Let me begin with our State Rep, Sid Kavulich. Representative Kavulich, thank you for being here. Also, I'd like to say our great County Commissioner, Mike Washoe. Mike, biggest disappointment last week, Mike, is I did not see your name on the ballot. So I'm very sorry about that, but I wish you well. But we still have, what, 6 or 7 months left? I said, here's Mike's opportunity to push all those things through in the next 6 months that he wanted to. Also, a former mayor of Scranton, Eugene Pilarz, is here. Mr. Mayor, where are you? Here, thank you. And there are 5 former members of our Board of Trustees. Let me just recognize them as a group. Jean Bovard, Austin Burke, Mary McDonald, Jerry Tracy, former chair of our board, and Dave Tressler are all here this morning. Thank you. I didn't have it on my list, but if my eyes don't deceive me, I see Bill Young in the back. Bill was a member of our board some years ago, so thank you, Bill. Sandra Myers. Okay, let me just do this. Everyone who served on the board, please raise your hand. I've often joked at these functions that sometimes in the future, I'm just going to recognize the people who are non-VIPs because there are many fewer than there are VIPs. So thank you all for being here. Like I said, this is I think you'll find this to be a very unique presentation after breakfast. Without further ado, let me introduce to you the Vice President of Mission and Ministry here at the University, Rick Malloy of the Society of Jesus, to provide grace before our meal. Rick?
Thanks, Pat. Again, good morning and welcome to the university. It's good to see so many generous and able leaders here today, because we know we are bidding farewell to a superb Scranton leader as Father Pilarz heads west to do for Milwaukee what he did for the Electric City: transform a Catholic and Jesuit university and make it a servant of the community. So let us pray. We thank you, our loving and abiding God. We thank you for the gift the University of Scranton has been, is, and will be to so many. We thank you for the service of Father Scott Pilarz these last 8 years. We ask you to bless him as he transitions to that city west of the Pocono Mountains, a city of beer and fish fries. The name Milwaukee comes from an Algonquin word meaning Milwaukee, which means good, beautiful, pleasant land. So he goes from one good, beautiful, pleasant land to another. We thank you for all the businesses and institutions that form our Scranton community. We thank you for the civic and business leaders present here today, and for all who make the Lackawanna Valley a good place for people to live and work and form their families. Help us to keep our institutions strong. Help us in all we do to love tenderly, do justice, and walk humbly with our God. The walls of Brennan Hall have engraved the words of Jesus: From everyone to whom much is given, much will be required. And from the one to whom much has been entrusted, even more will be demanded. Help us to share and multiply our graces and our gifts, our talents and our treasure with all, especially the poor and needy. And please feel free to pray in the faith tradition that roots your soul. We pray together. Bless us, O Lord, these thy gifts, which you're about to receive from thy bounty through Christ our Lord. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Father. We'll call tables a few at a time to the buffet, and we'll be back in about 20 minutes for the remainder of the program. Good morning, everybody. Continue to finish your meals. No need to stop. I do want to get the program started. And I want to ensure that we have enough time for Father Pilarz. So what I'd like to do is move right to the main attraction, if you will, and if time permits, we can provide an update on the university at a late, afterwards. But let me go ahead and move immediately to the main event and ask, if we can, Pete Dancek, the president of PNC here in the Northeast, if he would come up and introduce Father Pilarz. Pete?
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. This is truly, it's a very happy moment. It's a very sad moment because it's Father Pilarz's last President's Breakfast here with all of us this morning, and he has had such a profound effect on the University of Scranton and the community at large. There's been so many accomplishments that he has had since, and we were talking on the way, and it was with Bill Sardoni walking in, and I says, I can't believe, I said, someone asked me how long Father Pilarz has been here, and I says, I don't know, I says 4 or 5 years, and they said, no, July 1st, 2003. And that time has gone by so quickly, and he has done such an amazing job here at the University of Scranton. There's been major accomplishments that have occurred over the last 7-8 years. Not to say the least, they had the ambitious plan with the Pride, Passion, and Promise. The Capital Campaign Initiative, which the goal was $125 million, which they successfully surpassed that this past month and had a celebration. And finally, the capital projects that have occurred during his tenure as president, whether it be the Patrick and Margaret DeNaples Center, we have the John and Jacqueline Dion Campus Green, the Christopher and Margaret Condren Hall, the $83 million Unified Science Center, and a 400-bed apartment building that is under construction right now, which appropriately will be renamed Reverend Scott R. Pilarz S.J. Hall. So the accomplishments have been incredible. We all know Father, we all love Father, and as I said, it's mixed feelings being here this morning because he has had such a profound effect on northeastern Pennsylvania. And what he has been able to accomplish here at the University of Scranton has just been incredible. So with no further ado, Father Pilarz.
Thanks, Pete, and thanks to you all for being here. As you can imagine, these are very bittersweet days for me. I have loved my 8 years here, and we have together, and I emphasize together, accomplished a lot for the University of Scranton, for the city, for the region. I hope ultimately for the greater glory of God and the well-being of humankind. But I can't underscore enough how much this was a cooperative effort. I've had the great good fortune to work with remarkable women and men who have dedicated their lives to this institution and to the sacred work of the university. So I'm grateful to all of you who have been so supportive of the university and of me personally in these last 8 years. I've said repeatedly that serving as president of the University of Scranton is the great privilege of my Jesuit life, and that still continues to be my strongest conviction, and I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to share these 8 years with all of you, and the great contributions you've made will never be forgotten, and Scranton will always occupy a big place in my heart. So thank you for all your help and all your support, and for this opportunity to be with you this morning to talk about the future of Catholic higher education. I don't claim to be an expert on this topic by any means, and it's an enormous topic. My sense is if you stick around a kind of work long enough, people will start to consider you an expert. And I've been around Catholic higher education for 34 years, since I was a freshman at a Catholic and Jesuit university. And since then, my perspective has evolved, certainly, and changed substantially. It's evolved from my perspective as a student, as a graduate student and a young Jesuit, as a faculty member, as an administrator, and now 8 years as president. So I'm beginning to formulate, because people have asked me to, I'm beginning to formulate some ideas about the future of Catholic higher education, and I'm going to try them out on you this morning. These are nascent ideas, inchoate in some ways, but taking some shape, because I've been asked several times now to try to articulate where I think Catholic higher education is going. But before I do that, I think we need to have a brief sense of where Catholic higher education has been. I emphasize brief because Catholic higher education spans thousands of years, right? So put on your seatbelts. We're going to take a crash course from the Middle Ages to today, in a sense. Very important note, there were no universities before the church. There were no universities before the church. The great medieval universities of Europe grew out of the heart of the church. Ex corde ecclesia. Places like Paris, Bologna, Florence, Oxford, Cambridge, Krakow, they grew out of the heart of the church. Mostly the work of monastic orders, Benedictines, Augustinians, Carthusians, or the mendicant orders, Franciscans and Dominicans. But it's very important for us to always hold in our imagination the fact that these institutions were really born out of the heart of the church, and that there would be no universities had it not been for the interest of the church in the life of the mind. Ours is a faith tradition that imagines that faith and reason are compatible. And the church, from its earliest days, had this inclination that God could be found and, in fact, served through the exercise of the life of the mind. Maybe Thomas More put it best. God made animals for their innocence, plants for their simplicity, but human beings he made to serve him wittily in the tangle of their minds. We serve God wittily in the tangle of our minds. That's an enormous presupposition, which is not shared across other faith traditions. But the Roman Catholic Church has always held that, and Western Christianity has always held that God can be sought and found and served in the exercise of the life of the mind and in the production of knowledge. And in fact, we participate in the very work of God when we produce knowledge. Very important conviction. So, out of that instinct were born the great universities of Europe. They were largely places where people went to study philosophy and theology in the Middle Ages. Things took a decisive turn in the 16th century, and Jesuits were part of that turn. I'm not claiming the Jesuits were entirely responsible for it, but they were present at the beginning when universities were changing, moving not away from philosophy and theology, but toward a more inclusive stance of this burgeoning of intellectual interest in other disciplines, especially rhetoric and literature. And out of that, an interest in law and other professions, medicine. But this is an evolutionary moment in the 16th century. Now, when Jesuits got into the educational business, there were essentially two models of schools. The great university, Oxford, Cambridge, Paris, Bologna, Florence, Krakow. Great universities. The second model, though, were what were called collegium, colleges, what we would know as colleges, which were really sort of straddling the fence between what we would know as junior and senior year of high school and freshman and sophomore year of college. So we got these two models, the universities and the collegium. The universities were about research and the production of knowledge. The colleges, the collegium, were more deliberate about the formation of students for citizenship and good morals. So you've got these two models. The Jesuits, who backed into the education business, by the way, St. Ignatius did not found us as an order who would run schools. We backed into the education business. But once we did, we were more immediately attracted to the college model, to the formation model. All right? Very important for us. That's where they thought they belonged. Shaping souls. The foundational Jesuit documents talk about the mission of the Society of Jesus is to shape souls. So how better to shape souls than in these colleges that would form young men? Only men went to these kinds of schools in the 16th century. All right. Now, fast forward a couple hundred years, and the Jesuits land in the United States, largely to serve immigrant populations. And they had to face the question of what sorts of schools should we open in the United States? Now, I just jumped over a lot of history. For example, 75 years between the start of the Society of Jesus and the foundations in the United States, the Jesuits were out of business. We were suppressed by the Pope. It's another story for another day. All right? But the Pope, another Pope, a later Pope, brought us back into business just about the time the Jesuits were landing in the United States. In fact, in this part of the country, in Maryland specifically. The Jesuits got here and started to think, all right, we had this model in the US, or in Europe. What do we do now in the United States? So, they were pretty much wedded to the college model. Let me give you a little bit of context for the methodology that the Jesuits brought with them when they came from Europe to the United States. The methodology that the Jesuits used, or the pedagogy, the way of educating that the Jesuits were familiar with, is rooted in Ignatius Loyola's own experience. His experience of God and God's unconditional love for him as a unique individual. This is an incredibly important pedagogical model. It's rooted in one person's experience of God's love for him, unconditional love for him, as a unique individual, with his own hopes and aspirations and dreams and fears and anxieties. That's what we mean by cor personalis. This is a great phrase that we kick around at Jesuit schools all the time, right? Cor personalis. And if anybody tells you, and this is a little hobby horse of mine, if anybody tells you, people, the Scranton folks in the room are nodding their heads because they've heard me say this 100 times. If anybody tells you, excuse me, that cor personalis means the education of the whole person, it does not. Now, we're all in favor of the education of the whole person, but the Greeks believed in that. There's nothing particularly Ignatian about that. What's particularly Ignatian is this conviction that God loves each one of us unconditionally in our own individuality. And that's the way that teachers should deal with students. That is the heart and soul of Ignatian pedagogy. That teachers should deal with students, ideally, the way that God dealt with Ignatius. That's a pretty radical pedagogical position. But it's at the heart of the matter for who we are. Now, again, we love the education of the whole person. That's great, right? But we are about more than that. We're about the practice of cor personalis, this care for individuals. So, back to the emergence of Catholic higher education in America. As we know so well in this valley, Catholics migrated to the United States in droves. And from an educational perspective, they were an underserved population. And in many places, an underserved population that experienced prejudice. Catholics were not able to attend the burgeoning schools, especially the elite colleges in the eastern part of the United States, Harvard, Yale, Princeton. Catholics were not welcome there early on in the history of our country. Right. So it fell to the church, and especially to religious orders, to begin to supply education for American Catholics. Catholics were hungry for education and wanted to find their place in the world. So religious orders, including the Jesuits, started to supply that need. The Augustinians at Villanova, the Dominicans at Providence, the Holy Cross Fathers at Notre Dame, and especially Jesuits all across the country, started to open schools primarily for Catholic immigrants who were not able to access education elsewhere. Following their instincts, the Jesuits in particular, but pretty much everyone else as well, opened the college model. And by the way, there are very few of these left. I'm going to talk about this kind of hybrid that we're about now. But you could look at a place like Holy Cross as one of the last existing expressions of this instinct to open colleges, pure form colleges. So these were smaller scale places that specialized in the liberal arts and were at the beginning exclusively undergraduate schools. Later, and not too much later, but later, Catholics began to aspire to practice medicine or law or go into the world of finance and even ultimately earn PhDs and join the ranks of the academy. So there was pressure on these small Catholic colleges to grow, to expand, to add programs. The college model was no longer sufficient to meet the needs of the Catholic population. But this is a tremendous tension. And we live with it every day at almost every Catholic university in the United States. This tension between our instinct to privilege to give pride of place to the formation of young women and men for good citizenship and morals, and at the same time to produce doctors and lawyers and MBAs and PhDs. That is a very hard tightrope to walk, because it's all about priorities and making choices and allocating resources. And if you think it's easy, grab Ed Steinmetz for a cup of coffee at the end of this talk, right? And he'll tell you just how hard it is as the chief financial officer at a place like this to allocate resources appropriately. We have to choose among priorities, and that's a very hard thing to do. Right? But it is part and parcel of the pressure that we face now as we look into the future of Catholic higher education. What are our priorities? And how do we continue to balance our instinctive desire to shape souls, which has always been the heart and soul of our mission, and the need of people who come to us to go on into the professions and to join the ranks of the academy? This is a big pressure point, and you need to keep that in mind if you want to consider the future of Catholic higher education. Again, almost every Catholic university right now is at that tipping point. Where do we go? Now, there's some other pressure points that affect the future of Catholic higher education in the United States. Let me just name a few. The for-profits. They are nipping at our heels, to say the least, because they can deliver a degree far more efficiently, and they would claim more effectively, and certainly a lot less expensively. So it is incumbent upon us to articulate as well as we can the value proposition of the kind of education students receive at a place like Scranton, where we are informed by the conviction that students learn best in real time, in a classroom, with a teacher, rubbing shoulders and matching wits. That there's no substitute for the in-person contact that we think is constitutive of an excellent education. I'm not saying there's no place for online education, particularly in graduate school, but there is pressure coming to bear on us from the for-profits. There are other kinds of pressures facing us as well. And I'll talk about one that might sound contradictory. It's the professionalization of educators. 50, 75 years ago, when somebody joined the faculty at a place like Scranton, their primary loyalty was most likely to the University of Scranton. As younger faculty join us now, their primary loyalty is, in most cases, to their discipline. Chemistry, philosophy, English. And that's a good thing on the face of it. We want really competent, excellent young professors. But we have to enculturate them into the mission of the place. By and large, they come to us absolutely unaware of what it means to teach at a place like this. They come out of graduate programs where the emphasis is almost exclusively on research and publication. And we've got this instinct that we're about the transformation of souls. That's foreign language to young faculty members coming, by and large, coming to a place like this. So that's a pressure point that comes to bear on us. Right. Now, we live with these pressures. And I think we live relatively comfortably with them for a couple reasons. I think we can rightly look to the Catholic intellectual tradition as a mainstay for us, a source of life and inspiration. We can point to 2,000 years of people, women and men, wrestling with real issues, trying to articulate as best they can a way to find and make meaning in their lives. That is a tremendous resource for us, and we can never abandon that. If we abandon that, we do so at our peril. But Catholic higher education can thrive if we continue to mine the resource that is ours in the Catholic intellectual tradition. We can also thrive if we continue to hold close to the charisms or spirits of the religious orders that founded these Catholic schools in the United States for the most part. That doesn't mean that those charisms or spirits belong only to the members of the religious orders who work on these campuses, because you all know, my friends, that the numbers of Jesuits are diminishing. There are 2 of us in this room right now. 25 years ago, there would have been 10 of us in this room. 50 years ago, there would have been 50 of us in this room. But get used to the idea that there are going to be 1 or 2 of us. So if the future of Catholic education is going to be bright, it means that people like you, and especially the people who work at the University of Scranton who are in this room, it means that you need to engage and explore and hopefully embrace the charism, the spirit that got this place up and running and has sustained it for so much of its history. And let me tell you about a couple ways in which that's happening at a place like Scranton, and it's not unique to Scranton. We have some incredibly generous members of the administration and staff and faculty who are giving hours of their lives to opportunities to do just that, to embrace and to engage and to help understand the Ignatian charism in our case. So, for example, Pat Leahy, Tom McKinnon, Tricia Day, I'm going to miss a few people, Brian Kniff, are engaged, Gretchen Van Dyke, in a program called the Ignatian Colleagues Program. They're giving 18 months of their lives to this program, which includes a silent retreat, an international immersion experience, lots of time in small groups and online, exploring the Ignatian charism. 18 months of their lives. That means we're creating a cadre of people here who will know as much about Jesuit education as Rick Malloy and I do. That's tremendously important. And also here on campus, twice a year we run 2 seminars. One on the nature of Catholic and Jesuit higher education, and one on the Catholic intellectual tradition. These are for faculty, and they're run by faculty. It's a kind of peer-to-peer education. Also tremendously important. It gives young faculty in particular the opportunity to explore the dynamic that really keeps this place alive. And more of that needs to happen. That's tremendously important. This is the age of the laity. The church has been very direct in proclaiming that, which means that the future of Catholic higher education belongs to people in this room. As much as it ever did belong to the Jesuits, it now belongs to you. And if Catholic higher education in the United States is going to survive and thrive, it's because people like you are going to step up to the plate and make it happen. It's got to be your will and your desire that Catholic higher education thrive. And based upon my 8 years here in Scranton, I have every reason to believe that it will. People like yourselves are tremendously dedicated to the proposition that life is best lived generously in the service of others. And that an education that wants to produce young women and men who will go out and make the world more gentle and just, that's worth a lifetime's work. So let me end where I began and thank you for all your support and open the floor up for some questions. I'll be happy to try to answer whatever might be on your mind or respond to what might be on your mind. Yeah.
Very briefly, my question would be, how do you translate that value proposition to the non-Catholic student applicant, of which 75% are not?
Yeah, I think it's an easy sell, to be honest with you. When we talk about our core values, they transcend denominational lines. I think the kinds of aspirations that we have resonate with all sorts of people of goodwill. So it's not a confessional thing. As I said, and you raised a very good point, these schools largely opened to serve an immigrant Catholic population. And we'll never give up on that mission. We're thrilled, for example, at the University of Scranton, that almost a quarter of our students are the first in their families to go to college. So we're keeping faith with the mission of Bishop O'Hara in 1888, right? We're still doing that, but at the same time, we know that we do a great service to our own students by opening this place up. But I do think that when we talk about women and men for others, or the pursuit of excellence grounded in gratitude, those are ideas that resonate with people far outside the Catholic Church or outside Christian denominations. Yeah.
Father, the challenge between college and university, how do you see that working through the system? Do you see some schools taking the university model versus the college? How do you see that work out?
Yeah, I think each school has to work it out for itself. I'm in an interesting place right now, moving from Scranton to Marquette. Marquette has a law school, a medical school, not a medical school, dental school, an engineering school, 22 PhD programs. But it's very interesting. I've been back and forth a lot this year. If you talk to the faculty at Marquette, they still think of themselves as a college. They have all these other programs, and they do them well, but they still struggle because they imagine themselves doing the work of university or college teaching, really. But it gets complicated, and it really comes down to setting priorities and allocating resources. Graduate education is tremendously expensive. PhD programs are tremendously expensive. Because you really want to fund students to do that if you're going to do it well. So different places are going to answer that differently, and a lot of it's going to have to do with availability of resources. Yeah.
How do we address the later maturation of the students? It seems like the first couple of years of college now translate to the last couple of years of high school 20 or 30 years ago. Between that and helicopter parents that are in, how are we going to, I guess, accelerate that maturation process, making our students into functioning adults?
It's a great question. I'm tempted to kick it to Rick Malloy, who's more of an expert on this stuff than I am.
I don't know, you hang around long enough, I think you're an expert. Great question. There's a lot being done on that question. Dr. Curley here, our Vice President for Student Affairs, basically saying we have to tell the young people what we want. Sometimes we're afraid to tell them what we want because we're afraid they'll say they don't want to come here. But if you want Animal House, this is not the place for you. If you want to come here and be offered a program of personal transformation that connects up to the social transformation of our world, this is the place for you. And I think we're better in general in higher education than when I went to Lafayette College. That was Animal House. And parents aren't going to pay for just camp college. But we have a ways to go. We have to really challenge our young people because they do come with more expectation that things will be done for them that now they really have to step up the plate and do for themselves.
Yes.
Does university pray for or encourage vocations?
Absolutely. We do an awful lot of work to try to young men to think about priesthood and religious life, and young women as well. It's an uphill battle, as you might imagine. I mean, when I talk about some of the pressures that face Catholic higher education, one that I didn't elaborate on this morning but could at great length, is the secularism that is very much a part of our culture. And young people grew up in a world that largely trivializes the transcendent. I was at a great meeting of Jesuit university presidents from around the world last April in Mexico City, and the Superior General of the Society of Jesus was there, and he gave a terrific talk in which he articulated a notion that he ascribes to as he looks out at the world and reads the signs of the times. Calls it the globalization of superficiality. I think it's a great phrase, the globalization of superficiality. And that kind of superficiality very much affects the lives of our students. When you think of how they learn, where they get information, the pace of their lives doesn't leave much room for reflection. And vocation is, at least in great part, born of some reflectivity. You know, you've got to think and pray your way into religious life for priesthood. And the way our students live doesn't much allow for that. I worry all the time that there's a great quote from T.S. Eliot, that they had the experience but missed the meaning. They live at such a rapid pace that they're doing great things. Think of all the service that they're doing. As Rick said, when people like Rick and I were in college, that wasn't so much the case. We didn't go on these great international service programs. Our students are doing that, but the worry is, do they come right home and get so busy immediately that the experience is finally lost and it just dissipates for them. So I think it's a real challenge, not only in terms of the promotion of vocation, but vocation to the priesthood or religious life, but even for married life and parenthood. I don't think the globalization of superficiality has to affect the way that married couples live out their lives and how parents live out their lives. So the general really called us to imagine and reflect on how at a place like Scranton can we offer antidotes to this globalization of superficiality, which is a long way of saying it's hard to promote vocations to the priesthood and religious life, but we work pretty hard at it. Right.
And I think I'm correct. I mean, you can't take a lot of credit for this because at your time it was Georgetown that was producing a lot of Jesuits. Isn't Scranton right now, the last 5-10 years, has a large majority of the young Jesuits have a connection to Scranton Prep, Scranton, or taught here?
Yes, it's remarkable that this place has been thank God for the Holy Spirit. We can't take credit for it, but for whatever, I could, if I had world enough and time, could at least attempt to tell you why I think that's happening at the University of Scranton. But Rick's right. We've produced a lot of young Jesuits in recent years, and we're thrilled.
Ones entering in office.
Right. We have a senior, great guy, Bill Woody, went to St. Joe's Prep and is graduating from here and has been accepted to the novitiate. And we've had at least one or two every year for the past 8 years that I've been here. Yeah.
What do you see as the biggest threat to Catholic higher education, and especially here at the university?
I think we're in pretty good, if not great shape here at the University of Scranton. We've got some really dedicated members of the faculty and staff who cling tenaciously to the mission here and work overtime to make sure it is sustained and enhanced. So I have every confidence that the University of Scranton is in great shape in terms of its Catholic and Jesuit identity. I don't know other institutions well enough to speculate about where they are, but I think as long as we're willing to do the work of encouraging people to engage in work around mission, we'll be fine. we'll be fine. Yeah.
Father, the standalone model, I've been told is on its way out. I was a graduate of Dickinson Law School. They were merged into Penn State because the standalone model didn't work. We have a standalone medical school here. Do you see any possibility of the Catholic using extending to medical school?
Not as long as I'm president.
That's a courageous stand.
So for the next 4 days, we're safe. I don't know the answer to that. That's very, very complicated. And I don't know enough about the Commonwealth Medical College to even speculate about what that might look like. Yeah.
Higher education is expensive. Catholic private higher education is especially expensive. Is there concern that there's a point in time where we price ourselves out of the market, and is there anything being done, institutionally to avoid that?
Sure. Yeah, we worry about that constantly. Ed can certainly speak to that, but it's priority number one in many ways for us. We have this legacy of providing access to a great education, and we never want to compromise that legacy. So we're always looking for ways to save money, right, Ed? Always looking for ways to save money. Ed doesn't sleep at night, right? But it's not easy to save money. People, parents, students have expectations of the kinds of amenities that are part of American higher education now. We want to provide resources for our faculty to do research, to keep pace in their own academic disciplines. All of that costs an awful lot of money. From my perspective, the snappy answer to that complicated question is we have to raise more and more money for scholarships, more and more money for endowment. So that's a reality that we face, that we rely on the generosity of well-intentioned and open-hearted, large-hearted people to help provide the kind of, we look especially to people who went to a place like Scranton, many of whom on scholarship, to say, help us provide that kind of education for the next generation. That's a big part of what the job of administrators is to do. But it's an uphill battle. Yeah.
Father, from someone who's worked with another order, I've always admired and envied the way the Jesuits do things. And I'm not saying this because I'm in a room of Jesuit friendlies, but from not only a financial aspect, an educational aspect, but also a Catholic way of life. How do we get that message out in a time when it seems as though Catholicism is being attacked and on the decline?
Yeah, that's a very good question. To the first part, I think, and I don't know any other religious orders, to be honest with you. I've never had any experience. I went to a Jesuit university, it was my first contact there, and I was very impressed with the Jesuits whom I met. And that's why I joined. So I don't have a perspective of other religions, but I will say our great strength, or maybe one of our greatest strengths, is the charism or the spirituality that is Ignatius Loyola's gift, not only to Jesuits, but to the church. There is something so powerful about the dynamism of the spiritual exercises in particular that informs us and informs our worldview and our work. And again, when Ignatius developed the exercises, he was not a Jesuit, he was not a priest, he was a layperson. So our spirituality, I think, is adaptable. Thomas Merton, the great spiritual writer of the last century, described Ignatian spirituality as pedestrian. And I think he's right. It's ordinary. So it's ordinary, and therefore busy people from all walks of life can get into it. You don't have to be a mystic to embrace Ignatian spirituality. It is a pedestrian spirituality. So I think that's our greatest strength. It's flexible, it's adaptable, people identify with it. It's a spirituality for busy people. So I think that is our greatest strength in so many ways. That Ignatius's insights which were absolutely radically progressive in the 16th century, still resonate with folks. And the way they inform the life of our schools is also kind of a great treasure for us. You're right, this is a tough time for the church, there's no doubt about it. And in some ways, a deservedly tough time for the church. We have not acquitted ourselves particularly well. And I think it's obvious to me, anyway, from my humble opinion, if you ask, we need to be so much more transparent. We cannot any longer, if we ever should, have operated as an all-boys club or all-men's club, holding everything so close in. Right? And I think if the church would, I'm now on my soapbox, but it's all right because I'm leaving in 4 days. I think if the church would look at the model of most Catholic universities, where we're run by a board of trustees, we're not run out of the rec room of the Jesuit community. We were 75 years ago, but for the past 35 years, we are run by an independent board of trustees that scrutinizes every decision I make, that has absolute access to the books. That's a good, healthy model. And I think the church is moving in that direction, but for too long was reluctant. You know, when you think of it, man, I entered the Jesuits at 18 years old, and I studied philosophy and theology, and I have a PhD in English. So you put a guy like me in charge of an institution with a budget of, what's the budget next year? $190 million. That's crazy on the face of it. Right? I have never balanced a checkbook or paid income taxes in my life. Right? So you make me the chief executive. You better surround me with some people who know something about money. Right? And you better throw a couple lawyers into the mix, right, to make sure that we're running the place as we should. That's a healthy model for running an institution. Well, I don't know about putting the English professor in charge, but if you're going to do that, if you're going to put a priest in charge, you better surround that priest with some really capable lay women and laymen who can help that priest obey the law and make sure that you're exercising fiduciary responsibility. Yeah. Okay, enough of my speech about church administration for the moment. Couple more questions, one more question. Great. All right, this was fun, thank you.
Wow. Incredible. This is the reason why we're going to miss Father Pilarz. I could tell you both personally and professionally, we've been truly blessed to have him in our community. It's listening to his passion and knowing that we had someone at the helm of the University of Scranton for the past 8 years, knowing that this university has transformed over the past 8 years, and looking not just at the buildings that have been built and the programs that have been established, but the quality of the students that have graduated from this university has just been astounding, and the accomplishments of these students. And it's because of this leader here. And Father Pilarz, I just want to thank you personally on behalf of PNC Bank. You have been an incredible leader. It's, as I said, I have mixed emotions today, very happy, also very sad. I will tell you though, knowing that where you were going to go, we had the foresight 2 years ago to buy the biggest bank in Milwaukee. and we're actually your bank out there.
I don't have to change banks.
You don't have to change banks. And transparency. And I actually know the person that has my job in Milwaukee, and said, we have this incredible person coming. We're sad that he's leaving us, but you have an incredible asset coming to you. And I says maybe a really good restaurant that has good liquor, cigars, some wine. So on behalf of PNC, we have a gift certificate for you for this. And truly, from the bottom of our heart, we thank you so much that you have given this community. Thank you.
Thank you.
You don't need to give us the amount, Father.
Pete, you won't be surprised in typical Jesuit fashion, I've already been to this restaurant. It's great, it's terrific.
Are they still going to let you back?
Let me just conclude with some remarks. I've been here 7 of the 8 years that Father Pilarz has been here, and I'm not just saying this to curry favor with the boss, because as he's pointed out over and over again, there's only 4 more days I can call him the boss, but I believe that was the best PNC speaker series lecture, if you will, that we've had in those 7 years. Makes me wonder why we didn't invite you earlier. Let me just say this too. Oh, and the other thing that dawned on me, when you get out to Milwaukee and settle, we might have you back for that address on the suppression of the Jesuits that you mentioned. So let me just conclude with one thing. We didn't do the university update. Pete gave much of it. You know, we finished the capital campaign before Father left. All the capital projects are on track in a way that I think Father's very comfortable before leaving. There were a whole host. I mean, we're hoping that this freshman class coming in the fall will be the largest freshman class we've ever enrolled, the highest quality from the widest geographic area in a tough environment. So Father leaves with that, with the university in that strong position. But there's one other thing I just wanted to share with you to sort of to conclude. Father talked about this college model and the importance of faculty matching wits with students. And as you know, we at the university have a great reputation for producing prestigious scholarships. And we do this every year around this time. We announce these prestigious scholarships. This year we have once again a Goldwater, which is the most prestigious scholarship in the sciences to a student. Only 1 of 6 individuals at Jesuit institutions across the country to win a Goldwater this year. We have another individual who won a Truman this year, which is one of the most prestigious scholarships in public service. 1 of 3 students from Jesuit schools across the country to win a Truman is here from the University of Scranton. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is that many of you know that we as a university have been recognized as a Fulbright powerhouse by the Chronicle of Higher Ed. And this year we had once again 10 applicants to the Fulbright. And again, these are individuals that our faculty identify early and work with. These are the best of our college type students. And this year we had 10 more applicants. Of those 10 applicants, we had 6 finalists to the Fulbright. 6 finalists out of 10. And typically in a given year, you win a couple, 2, 3 of those 6. Well, this year, the university won 6 of those 6 finalists won Fulbright awards. Which I bring to your attention only because I think that this is a perfect example, at least in a small subsection of our student body, of the kind of work that Father has urged us to do here at the university for the past 8 years. And it brings tremendous academic respect to the university. So I just would like to ask you, if you would, and first of all, of course, thanking PNC for their support. We will continue, I hope, in the coming year under a new president to continue to host these PNC Speaker Series events. But if you would, I'd like to ask you to join me one final time in thanking Father Pilarz for his 8 years of service to the city of Scranton and to the University of Scranton. Thank you, Father.